Leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. I'm here in Washington, D.C., where they're dealing with the aftermath of yesterday's shock in Virginia just down the road. And indeed, we're now told that Congressman Scalise, who was shot by this political activist gunman, is in a very serious condition. At home, of course, everything is completely dominated by the horrendous events in the Grenfell Tower yesterday. As you will have heard on the news, the official death toll at the moment is 17. We're told it will rise significantly. We don't know quite how far. And we have had some reactions from the main political leaders today. Indeed, this is what Theresa May, our Prime Minister, said was the first step she would take.
Right now, people want answers, and it's absolutely right. And that's why I am today ordering a full public inquiry into this disaster. We need to know what happened. We need to have an explanation of this. We owe that to the families, to the people who have lost loved ones, friends, and the homes in which they lived.
Well, so there's going to be a full public inquiry, and perhaps I'll come on to Jeremy Corbyn's response to it a little bit later on. But I'm just sort of thinking back about the history of these public inquiries. I think particularly fresh in my mind is the John Chilcot inquiry into Iraq. Remember, did Saddam have weapons of mass destruction? Did the British government deliberately, willfully mislead Parliament and the people? And, you know, that inquiry not only cost £13 million, but it took a full 8 years to report. And there are lots and lots of other examples. Remember the serial killer doctor, Harold Shipman. Now, you know, that inquiry cost £23 million. Even the inquiry into those Sower murders, do you remember those 2 young girls were murdered by the school caretaker? And even that inquiry, led by Lord Richard, you know, took £10 million. And I could go on and on and on. I could talk particularly about Northern Ireland, about Bloody Sunday, about costs there running into the hundreds of millions of pounds. And we're still having inquiries 30 years after the events. And I just wonder, is really a public inquiry what we need? And I'm not going to get penny pinching about the cost, but how long will it take to set up a public inquiry? How long will it take to conclude? Don't perhaps people want something just a little bit more decisive than that? So is it worth the time? Is it worth the money? Is it the right thing to do? And if you think it is a waste of time and money, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or if you think, no, it's absolutely the right thing to do to establish the truth and try and stop it happening again, then of course you can text on 84850. You can also tweet using @LBC with the hashtag Farage and LBC. And, of course, we're live on LBC's Facebook page now. Anthony in Merson, you're my first caller this evening. Hello. Do you think Theresa May is right and that a public inquiry is the way to go forward?
Well, a caller earlier on with Ian Dale was talking about how a public inquiry in relation to Hillsborough went on for, 20-odd years, I think he said, and still they haven't really got any results. So I think, you know, there should be a public inquiry into public inquiries in that respect. But I think while you're in America, why don't you get some of the good old-fashioned grand jury dusty books out from the libraries over there and just see if we can maybe have a grand jury investigate this, as opposed to going back to Mr. Legal Government saying, can you sort out your legal problems, please, Mr. Legal Government?
Wow. Well, that's a very, very interesting point, Anthony, because here, when there's a congressional committee on something or a grand jury into something, they effectively have about the same power as a court. They can subpoena people. Yeah, they are. They can subpoena people to appear before them. And I often get the feeling that our parliamentary committees that we have in Westminster are talking shops, whereas here they are the real deal. And Anthony, I think, you know, actually we could we not, if we had the powers vested in our elected MPs, we could do this a damn sight more quickly than any public inquiry would ever provide any evidence.
Well, that's the whole point. You're supposed to have speed and swift, you know, justice should not be delayed or denied. And I think, you know, if people actually realise how to access the court system, so that they could set up Farage Court, for example, that can exist, and actually independently investigate. You could head the grand jury and then get the people in to fairly issue out orders and get people to come to court. You know, there's nothing special about a court.
So would it be fair to say, Anthony, that you think what Theresa May has said is just too little and it will take too long?
It's like asking the independent police complaints people to investigate the police. It's their own bodies set up to investigate their own boys. Get it out of the government. People who aren't registered to vote, who aren't British citizens, set up a court of record at the grand jury, and you'll sweep the board with these people, and ultimately the people who account will ultimately pay the price.
Anthony, that's a very positive suggestion for my first call this evening, and I thank you. Joe is calling from Kensington. Joe, are you anywhere near the Grenfell Tower?
Nigel, yes, well, I am. I live in South Kensington, Chelsea border. But listen, what a tragedy. And,
sure.
We need to do something very quick because the casualties will be in the hundreds. And,
well, Joe, woe down, Joe, woe down. I mean, in fact, the last statement from the Met Police suggested that it may not even reach 100. But either way, it's a lot of people, yeah? Let's just agree on that.
All right. And we need to have a quick, incisive inquiry, which I think you should be involved in, because you could lead it very, very well. And people need to be brought to account. Kensington and Chelsea councillors, the management company, and the contractors. And I want to see within a year more than a handful of people going to a jail for a long, long time.
So do you feel, Joe, in keeping with Anthony, our first caller this evening, that frankly what Theresa May has offered thus far simply isn't good enough?
No, it's not. No, it's too weak and simplistic. I think you should take charge of this.
Well, Joe, listen, I mean, I have no expertise on fire, hazard or disaster, but, you know, I can get things done in life. If they ask me, I would happily do it, Joe. Joe, thank you. Another caller there, you see, thinking that actually the Prime Minister calling for this inquiry, and Hillsborough's been mentioned, and I talked about Soham, and we could go on and on and on and on and on. And look at these public inquiries that take years, cost vast sums of money, and I think don't actually change anything. Now, if there's somebody out there with expertise of one of these inquiries, please ring up and tell me I'm wrong, and that in the past, sometimes, these inquiries have really not just drilled down to the root of the problem, but actually solved things and made them better. I'm all ears, because I am very sceptical about this process indeed, as were our first two callers. I wonder whether Verity in Newmarket has a different approach.
Hi there. I think that it's been quite a quick decision for them to come out and say that there needs to be a public inquiry. I think I agree, probably for the most part, of why they have said there needs to be one. But I think that it's not really the financial side of things that should be talked about at the moment. And I think the conclusions will have to be reached very quickly. It cannot be the case that a public inquiry for something like what happened, over the past couple of days goes on for years and years and years, which does happen with a lot of public inquiries. And the cost, obviously, they can be astronomical and still not reach any conclusions. But I think the main purpose of why it needs to be carried out is that the people that have lost their lives and the families and the people that have lost their homes do have, they have the answers and they have, something to take from how it happened and why it happened. It shouldn't have happened in this day and age. I work in the property industry. It should just not have happened.
No, Verity, I'm afraid your line is very poor. No, the point you make is right. There does need to be a deep drilling down into what happened, but Verity, I would suggest, and I think other callers feel the same, and you do too, that something else needs to happen and on a rather more speedy basis. There are a lot of people in this country living in high-rise blocks that were built in the 1960s and 1970s, all of whom I'm sure are feeling a little bit uneasy today. Verity, I thank you. Josh says by tweet, an inquiry defers responsibility most likely to the next government. Think Lacanal. It took 4 years. Lacanal was the previous blaze that happened in a tower block, a slightly older tower block than the Grenfell Tower. One was built in the 60s in Camberwell, and yes, it took a very, very long time. Glyn thinks by text that it's a complete waste of time and money. Spend it on a memorial for the lost lives and inspecting similar structures. Ollie says public inquiries are often too long and don't always result in actionable charges. Well, actually, Ollie, they very rarely do. On Facebook, Tony says inquiries are easily said and done, but we need decisive action now. Tony, that I think is the mood so far in this programme. Robert says inquiry, question mark. We all know that that just means a whitewash to protect certain people. And Dipak says inquiries take too long. She probably won't be in power by the time this inquiry has reported. Well, she may not be in power very long at all. Who is to say? Look, my feeling is that it's okay to say, let's have an inquiry. Harold Macmillan, as Prime Minister, years ago joked when there was a crisis, just call a royal commission. I think people want to know something rather more urgent and active is going to happen than another long, dragged-out public inquiry. If you think that's wrong, please call me and tell me. But right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15. Well, you know, an event like this, it's horrid, but you kind of think it's a human tragedy that is unlikely, at least I thought yesterday, is unlikely to become something that is very political. Now, here I am in Washington, D.C., and when George W. Bush was president, do you remember there was Hurricane Katrina down in New Orleans and that part of America, an absolutely devastating hurricane that not just took many lives, but it also took away a lot of homes from a lot of families that didn't have proper insurance. It was a real human tragedy. And the abiding memory of Katrina wasn't just its devastation, it was the shot of the president in an aeroplane, looking out of the aeroplane down at the devastation below. There were no shots of the president down on the ground meeting suffering and grieving families and communities. And Hurricane Katrina very seriously hurt George W. Bush's credibility and indeed his presidency. I wonder whether something similar is going on here. Why do I say that? Well, I say it because the Prime Minister went to the site today, and as you know, we've been debating it, announced there's going to be a public inquiry. But, you know, what did she do? Did she go and meet the residents of Ladbroke Grove and Notting Hill affected by the fire? No, she didn't. She went and met, and yes, of course, she met the fire services, and she met the police. Jeremy Corbyn turned up, and there he was, visiting volunteers in the relief centres, pictures of him actually hugging people, you know, who'd lost their possessions, or perhaps they were worried about friends or family who have not yet been found or identified. And they were two very stark and very contrasting images. And this is what Corbyn said at the site. Or he's just listen to what Jeremy Corbyn said.
I'm very sad for all those that have lost loved ones. I'm in deep sympathy for those that are going through the grieving process, and I reach out to those that are now going through the trauma of wondering what's happened to their loved ones, because the bodies have not all been recovered. 17 are known to have died, and there will be others. But I also feel very, very angry. This is a wealthy country in the 21st century, and a fire in one flat in a block of flats with proper safety procedures and proper fire protection should not have spread in the way it did. But clearly the fire started in one flat, and that's being investigated, went up the stairwell and affected the higher floors of the building, but also, interestingly and catastrophically, spread outside the building where the cladding burnt. And so we had literally a towering inferno. And the local residents, understandably very angry about it, particularly those from the Grenfell Action Group who had complained about their concerns on safety there, concerns about fire prevention.
Later on in the day, Corbyn added, hundreds of thousands of people in our country live in tower blocks, very high-rise tower blocks. Every single person who lives in a high-rise apartment today is going to be thinking, how safe am I? And it does seem to me, and yeah, we still don't know the death toll, and it's a horrible human tragedy, but it does seem to me that this already has an enormous political dimension. And actually, it's an extension of the general election campaign, where Jeremy Corbyn, forget politics, but Jeremy Corbyn appeared to be human, down there, meeting people, talking to people, and the Prime Minister appeared to be above it all and frankly somewhat aloof. And I do just remind people that for George Bush, you know, that photograph of him looking out of the plane at the devastation below, rather than being on the ground, absolutely damaged hugely his presidency. I think we're seeing the first stages of something rather similar. And I go back to where we started. You know, Theresa May has called for a public inquiry, but frankly, is that good enough? Is it quick enough? Don't we really need a little bit more? I'm going to ask Graham in Manchester that very question. Graham, good evening.
I never thought I'd be requesting an audience with you.
Right.
For political reasons, but I have to agree with you. It beggars belief today well, she's not yet Prime Minister, is she?
Well, no, she is still Prime Minister, yes.
There's no Queen's speech. She's a Prime Minister in waiting. She couldn't be bothered talking to the real people.
Next Wednesday...
She went instead to patronise the people on the coal face, who for the past God knows how many years she's been battering with cuts.
Well, I don't think... Graham, she didn't go in to patronise them, did she? I mean, that wasn't her intention.
No, but that's what she did. That's how they'll feel.
Okay.
I guarantee it. But can we go back to this business about inquiries and what have you?
Yeah, of course.
Until, I mean, I don't know what you think of my opinion on this. Until we get coroners who don't have to make recommendations, but can order the government to do something. Because in 2009, a coroner made recommendations. But the last time something like this happened, then it took 4 years before the government could do anything about it. They didn't do anything about it. And what, a few months ago, they're still reviewing it. And one of them, the new guy who's now housing minister was interviewed today and said, we don't know what we're doing. We've yet to review it. But the guy who's now the chief of staff for the Prime Minister...
Mr. Barwell, yes.
Mr. Barwell, he's put it off and put it off and put it off. Now, he's only been in the job a year. But why don't we have coroners not making recommendations? Then we'll see some changes. It's appalling. It's not just the loss of life. It's the unnecessary loss of life. We had firemen arriving at a building and couldn't go in because the gas needed to be turned off. Who in the hell wants to put gas in a 24-storey building, for God's sake?
So, Graham...
We have cladding that's made of oil.
Graham, do you think that the coroner's court actually, and the recommendations that a coroner's court make, is enough, and that we get those recommendations?
No,
go on.
It's like taking the teeth out of a lion. There's no point in it being there. If they can't enforce anything, recommendations mean nothing. It's been 8 years since the last recommendations.
All right. So what, Graham? So what then? What's the one thing that could be done in the wake of this disaster that might make a difference?
Change the law. Make it so that we'll make it so that coroners, as soon as possible, can make decisions. Get the people that matter.
But through what forum, Graham?
Through a coroner's court, as soon as possible.
Fine.
Okay. You only need one body for a coroner's court. You could do it on one case and say that the rest will be covered by this because the circumstances are exactly the same. You have people who run that organisation that manage that building. The top boys are on £150,000 a year, and they've been conspicuous by their absence. And we have people, it's a bit like, I call it, was it Somebody once said about we are lions led by donkeys. You know, these people have gone and volunteered. I live up in Manchester. I'm a carer. I can't get down there to help. But my heart's with all those people because these people are heroes. These people are led by donkeys. The local council today couldn't even organise.
There's certainly, Graham, there are certainly a lot of questions to be asked, and we've got lots of suggestions here. Yours is Commoners' Courts with real powers, and I thank you for your call. I go next to Mike in Lincoln. Mike, is a public inquiry enough?
Well, you have to, people have drawn comparisons between this Hillsborough, in terms of Hillsborough inquiry taking almost 30 years to report. But you have to bear in mind, even with that long time scale, within months, a matter of months, there's a change to ground regulations to remove pens for spectators at the fences. There's change to police procedure. There's change to stewarding procedures, all this sort of thing, which is pretty much immediate to that disaster. So whilst a public inquiry is one thing, we also have to have a look, and now in parallel, how do we have fire safety in other tower blocks? How do we refurbish things? All that sort of thing. So there's no reason why those sort of changes can't be put in place pretty much straight away.
But who would actually do that?
Well, in terms of the, for example, Hillsborough, I'm not sure what the mechanism was in terms of enacting all those changes to ground regulations, policing.
But they happened.
All that sort of thing.
But it did happen quickly, Mike, didn't it?
It happened very, very quickly. And, of course, the public inquiry is more about sort of blame and all that sort of thing. And that's absolutely right. That has to happen. But I think surely in terms of public safety, the priority has to be looking at where else we have danger and addressing that straight away.
Yeah, fine. No, Mike, thank you. And that's a theme that we've heard from a few people. Actually, we do need a long-term, big inquiry into the roots of this, but short-term, we need some action. Mike makes a brilliant point that whilst Hillsborough took forever and cost a fortune, actually, football grounds all over the country made very rapid changes to ensure something like it did not happen again quickly. Vinny says, I have to agree with Nigel on this. There's a first. Well said, Mr. Farage. Itzik in Stamford Hill says, you mentioned Hillsborough and Soham. How much did Chilcot cost? It cost 13 million, Itzik. America does inquiries effectively and quickly. They have so much expertise after 9/11. Can't we use them to do this? Suggests Annette. I am not sure that the British government or British Parliament would be very keen on asking the Trump administration to get involved in this at this stage. I'm going to go to Michael in Hampstead. Michael, is an inquiry good enough? If it isn't, what should be done?
It isn't. I mean, unlike Greg, I believe I'm actually agreeing with you for once in my life.
Right.
I think we need to look at the fact that of criminal offences, which the fire brigade investigation and a police investigation will uncover, and charge people and companies that would have committed any offences if somehow, and that would be very quick, I presume, within months once they've searched the building properly.
Yes, it could well be, and you're quite right, Michael, that the police.
Yeah, you can't have an inquiry when you've got a criminal situation going on. Am I right or wrong?
I don't know. I would have thought the two could happen much at the same time. I may be wrong about that. But certainly, if people have willfully broken the law for profit, the police could act, Michael. But I don't see why a bigger inquiry couldn't happen. My concern, Michael, is what do we do in terms of stopping, rather than punishing those who are guilty. The real priority now must be, what do we do to make sure something awful like this doesn't happen again, or was it just a one-off freak accident? Michael, I thank you very much for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. As we discuss the horrors of the Grenfell Tower and the Prime Minister's call for a public inquiry, and whether that, frankly, is good enough and will be quick enough and will be strong enough, other things in politics, of course, are happening as well. And it has been announced today, formally, that Britain's renegotiation with the European Union will begin next Monday, the 19th of June, and David Davis will go to meet Monsieur Barnier, the French official who's representing the European Commission, and the formal talks will start. And then later on next week, on Thursday and Friday, there will be a summit where The heads of all 28 EU members, that still includes us, will meet in Brussels to discuss a variety of things, one of which will be Brexit, and that will be the first time, assuming that everything goes ahead, and we have our Queen's speech on Wednesday next, which I'm sure we will, that Theresa May will go to meet the other European leaders. So a big week, I think, for Brexit next week, and perhaps we'll get some big messages in terms of what the mood is in Brussels and how Mrs May is shaping up. Meanwhile, YouGov, who, I have to say, did get quite a lot right in that general election, they've put out a Brexit opinion poll today that I think is very interesting, because some have said, oh, well, of course, what the general election shows is that there is a rejection of this so-called hard Brexit, that the general election shows that actually we don't really want to leave. And here's some field work done by YouGov, done after the result of the general election, and this is how it splits. 44% of respondees are described as hard leavers. That, I guess, is people like me who just think we have to get out, take back our fishing waters, and we'll deal with trade deals or everything else, perhaps later on, if necessary. 26% are what are called relievers. They're people, in most cases, who didn't vote for Brexit last year in the referendum, but take the view either that it's the democratic will of the people and we should continue, or they've genuinely changed their mind. 21% are what will be called hard remainers, and that basically is your kind of Lib Dem and perhaps your Tony Blair opinion, which is that the referendum result was a disaster and we simply have to try and change it. And 9% don't know. So 70%, this is even higher than polls we talked about a month or two ago. 70% of Britons now think Brexit must be enacted. So the one thing for certain is that on this vital issue of Brexit, the general election has not changed anyone's minds at all. In fact, if anything, there's an even bigger percentage who want the government to get on with it. And yet we have a parliament that I think on Brexit, is beginning to look a little bit wobbly. But back to our main talking point, back to the horrors of Grenfell Tower, the call for a public inquiry, and indeed the body language and mood music of the leaders of our two main parties there at the site today. I'm going to ask Gary, who comes from Caiston in Norfolk, what he thinks. Gary, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. In 2009, after a fire in a tower block, I think very, very close by, a series of recommendations landed on the desk of government ministers. This is, 8 years ago?
Yes, that was in Gary, that was in Camberwell. And 6 people died, and you're quite right.
Yeah.
You're quite right. There were a series of recommendations made.
Yeah. So what do we do? Do we actually launch a full-scale inquiry that's going to take 10 years and cause people complete pain and heartache over that period of time at a cost of 13 million? Or do we sack the minister who's currently responsible, who sat on his hands, who sat on this report, done absolutely nothing, and take the risk that he may sue for a smaller amount than that? Do you know what I do to appease the people? And I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, sort of a Labour voter. I'm a traditional Tory voter. I'm thinking of seriously switching my vote. This is unbelievable. Do not dust this into the long grass. There are parents who have thrown their children out of a tower block while they've burned. These people should be falling on their sword, Nigel, all right? This is what you do in public office. If you get things badly wrong, where lives are lost, you fall on your sword. You don't clutch at every opportunity of power. This guy lost his job in Croydon. He's gone to a position in government. Fall on your sword, remove yourself, appease some of the people. That's the start, and then we can look at the issues falling out. Otherwise, there's going to be serious problems in this country, and I will join any group who wants to go out and protest against this, even not being a non-traditional voter in that way, because this is just unbelievable.
So, Gary, this has really made you very angry indeed, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It has made me incredibly angry, because the government should be reacting in the right way and not trying to dust this under the carpet. No. I mean, and you've seen, in your lifetime, other tragic events because they happen. But, I mean, does something about this feel worse, Gary, than things you've seen before? Well, it does, because, you look at the pictures and it looks like something that happens in another country, not happens in a country which is supposed to be the third or fourth richest country in the G8. I think it's something that happens in countries which have poor infrastructure. How have we let places like that have a lack of investment? How have we ignored regulation on safety? How have we put cladding up, which has appeased the rich people in Kensington? Potentially,
and why didn't the fire alarms work, Gary? That to me, I just simply
Why don't have any sprinklers?
I know. There are lots and lots.
Lots of reasons.
Yeah, there are. I said last night on the show, Gary, that normally when these sort of things happen, we start off with shock and horror, and that very quickly turns to sadness. And I noticed, even by last night, elements of recrimination and blame were coming in. And I sense that whilst we do absolutely feel for all of those people who've lost relatives and family and their possessions and everything else, I think this is different, isn't it? It's different to other disasters that we've seen, in the sense that I think what you represent, Gary, is I think there is a very strong mood here that says that all the Prime Minister has done today, effectively, is to brush it away by announcing a public inquiry. And I think people like you, Gary, want action. And I thank you for your call. And I think you're quite representative, actually, of what's out there. Catherine, in Canvey Island, is a public inquiry enough? Should we put our faith in it?
Yes, I think there should be an inquiry, but it should only last 1 year at the tops, maximum. Health and safety can then be involved with all the other police and all the other services. But, you see, I think it's going to go back to the same thing. These buildings were basically literally condemned back in the early 80s. Neither government have done anything about it, a Labour or a Tory government. They've both passed the buck. Government sends out central spending. It's up to whoever is in charge of that area at the time, how it's spent. And it was never put into practice. There's 4,000 up and down the country. They should be pulled down.
Yeah. And actually,
years ago.
And actually, Catherine, weren't the tower blocks just a massive mistake we made in the 1960s that actually tore communities apart? They've been a disaster, Catherine, really, haven't they?
That's right, they have. But it was highly recommended. But because there's been no money spent on building homes and houses, these ones have been left in place. And basically, they weren't fit for purpose when they was first put up. There was an ideology at a time that this is how we could all live. But if you wanted to put into practice of putting sprinklers in every single one of these blocks, it's going to cost millions and billions of pounds. Simply just demolish, get rid of them all.
So demolish them and go back to building houses in streets where people have neighbours, know each other, and their kids play together, Catherine. Would that be a better way of doing things?
That would be a better way of doing things. Yeah. But the point being is Labour had a chance to do this. The Conservatives have had a chance, because no one is going to tell me that over a period of 30 years in my lifetime, I have not... I mean, I'm 50-odd. I'm actually a bit older than you, Nigel. But no one's going to tell me.
No.
I haven't heard time after time that these places should be pulled down.
Yeah. Well, and of course, your part of South Essex has a few of these too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I know, driving down the A13 or whatever, I've seen them, and they're very much tower blocks from that same period. Catherine, I thank you for your call. Catherine simply making the point that everyone knew these things were a disaster 30 years ago and nothing was done. John suggests by text, how about a time-limited Truth for Amnesty Commission? Give people 2 weeks to tell the truth about what happened. After that, those found to be responsible get full punishment. John thinks we need a full judicial inquiry, not the whitewash of a so-called full public inquiry. That way, there is no way that anyone will be wriggling out of anything. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:45. Well, whilst Washington absorbs the shooting that took place in Virginia just down the road yesterday, and even this town begins to get a little bit jumpy, we, of course, are thinking about the aftermath of the appalling fire that we saw in the tower block, the Grenfell Tower, yesterday in London. The Prime Minister has announced a public inquiry, and I've been asking you now for nearly an hour, is a public inquiry enough? And a lot of you say, yeah, OK, we do need to get to the bottom of all of this in good time. But surely something needs to happen more quickly than that. And generally, I think the mood is the Prime Minister has not really said enough in terms of what is going to be done. That's how I sense the mood of your texts, your tweets, your Facebook messages and your calls. And I go next to Barbara in Edinburgh. Barbara, good evening. Is a public inquiry inquiry enough?
No. In fact, it's not that it's not just enough. I think it should stop now. The Prime Minister's coming out saying we're going to have a public inquiry and going away again. And that's really what it boils down to. And then people have to wait to see what's going to happen next. Nobody's really consulted properly. I mean, the people affected, the people affected by this should be consulted. They should be totally involved in what should happen. As far as finding the people who allowed it to happen, I think that this should be easier, because any company, if something happens in a company, it's really quite quick to get to the bottom of what happened and who was responsible. People are taking big salaries and getting away with things in the public sector, because that's what it is.
Well, Barbara, there was, of course, one of the big debates on this, from 1 o'clock that morning, is that it is said that the cladding that was put outside the building as part of the refurb last year actually caught fire and helped the fire to spread. Now, the contractor, and I'm not going to name them, but the contractor that was involved with that said that the cladding actually did conform to fire regulations standards. Now, if that's true, those standards clearly need to change. The point is, Barbara, all of that can be found out, I guess, through a public inquiry, but we might not know the results for a couple of years. So we do need something rather more quick to happen, don't we?
I think so. It should be faster, because when it drags on, put yourself in the position of somebody who is affected. When it drags on, it must be much worse for them.
Yes, because I think, it's very difficult to put ourselves in the position of some of those families today, and they'll be grieving for lost relatives, friends, neighbours, their possessions, goodness knows, lots of different reasons that people will feel sad. But I'm quite convinced that if you'd been through something like this, one of the things that you'd want, Barbara, is for this not to happen to somebody else.
That's right.
And that some lessons really were learned. Barbara, you're another caller who thinks not enough is being done, not enough speed is being shown, and I thank you for your call. I go to Sarah in Milton Keynes. Sarah, good evening. How do you feel about the government response?
No, it's not quick enough. I'm in the construction industry. I've sold building materials for over 20 years, and there's plenty of people who already know what to do. It's saddened me. I'm like that other bloke. I'll quite happily go on a protest about this. I've just been looking at all day. It's been driving me. Ronan Point, that happened in when I was born, about 68, 70 time. There was an inquiry then. And because it was this gas explosion, but it was all to do with the pressure that it could take within an explosion. So the inquiry found that, you could continue building as long as the building could withstand an explosion and still install gas. But if it wasn't strong enough, you weren't allowed to put gas in. They continued to apparently knock all the other buildings that were similar down, about 8 other buildings, and they took the gas out of those, but they knocked that Ronan Point down. I mean, this, for me, there should 3 points, really. Take the cladding off. A safe method of escape for people who are in similar buildings, so they know what to do. We've got technology to provide basic breathing apparatus to give you 5 minutes or whatever it would be. We've got the technology, I know we have. And over a staged period of time, I know that other lady said knock them down. That's obviously the ideal scenario, but if you can't do that, over a staged period of time, take the gas out, because the gas is not helping. It's a lot safer than it used to be, because obviously with the advent of modern appliances, cookers and that, you can't literally leave the gas on anymore. Like you used to be able to do. So, but over a period of time, those are the 3 things I would do. And knocking them all down, Sarah, there are 4,000 of them. But comment you made a moment ago that interested me.
You said that you'd be prepared to go on a protest about this.
Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely. I'll be honest with you. I went to college. I'm 45 now. I went to college in my 20s, and they told me after that high-rise, all new build. You see, I'm in a flat now, 4th floor. There's no gas in it, and I honestly thought that they didn't do it anymore. And obviously, I appreciate there's different building regs for existing buildings, but I thought over a staged period of time, I just don't think the gas has helped, and it's really upset me.
No. And Sarah, let me ask you.
People out, sorry.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever been on a protest before?
No.
See, it's interesting because you're saying this. We had Gary on the phone from Norfolk not 10 minutes ago, who was saying that he'd never been on a protest before, but he felt so angry and so strongly about this. And there is, I mean, you know, it's just 24 hours after this tragedy, and there is genuine, real anger out there. And Sarah, you're one of them, and I thank you very much for the passion of your call. Carl in Gatwick, do you feel angry about this, Carl, as well?
Not so much angry, Nigel. I think my anger on it is that sadly on Tuesday morning about 1 o'clock, I was staying in a hotel probably about 3 miles from the tower, and I actually watched it go up. At the time, I didn't really understand what was happening, but it brought back a little bit of deja vu for me, because I was out in Dubai 2 years ago, right next to a hotel that went up on New Year's Eve, and they both went up like tissue paper. And straight away, my thoughts are, this is a cladding issue. It was identical, Nigel. It was identical.
Yeah.
But jumping around back to the inquiry, what happened the following day in Dubai? The government directed the ministry or whatever to inspect all the buildings over 4 stories, and that was completed in Dubai within a week. Within a week. Yeah. And you know Dubai as well as I do. It was just done. It was just done, and I find it quite challenging to think, you know, compared to some of the periods it takes for us to have. Well,
Carl, that is absolutely fascinating. So Dubai, the right people were brought together and told, get on with it, and within a week they produced some answers. Amazing, amazing. And you must have been horrified watching all this happening last night. Or the night before?
Yes, it was deja vu. I mean, you know, sadly...
Yeah, you've seen it before?
Back, you know, I've seen it before. In Dubai, one firefighter died. It's the same size building, more or less the same configuration. Dubai fixed it, and sadly, I mean, I don't know how many people they're going to pull out of there. But
well, too many. Too many is the answer, Carl. Let's not speculate, but too many. And thank you for that call and for that information. Really, really interesting. And James in Hook, you're going to be the last caller tonight. Is a public inquiry enough for you, James?
I think it's something that needs to be done, Nigel. I think if Theresa May hadn't called for it, then again, it would be a matter of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Is it enough? No, I agree with the sentiment. I think something needs to be done sooner as well. I've been listening quite a lot. I've been travelling a lot with work the last couple of days. I've been in the car a lot, had a chance to listen to a lot of the calls on LBC. It's concerned me as well that this has become politicised very, very quickly, just as the consensus with the fire has happened so fast. And what worries me with that is that there's a lot of blaming going on. There's a lot of finger pointing. It's a lot about previous inquiries. Why wasn't it enacted? Is there enough investment going into the fire brigades and social housing and so on and so forth? The big problem right now is we don't know the cause of what spread the fire so quickly. It's assumed that it could have been the cladding. It's assumed that it could have been sprinklers. It's assumed that it could have been so on and so forth. We don't actually know yet. It could be a combination of factors that would never experience...
James, last night I was urging everybody not to rush to judgment. And I didn't want to see it too politicised, but I'm afraid, James, 24 hours on, whether you like it or not, and whether I like it or not, it has been very politicised. I thank you very much for your and all the calls we've had. A suggestion. We have the Queen's speech next week, and Parliament, a new Parliament, will assemble. I suggest we use Parliament to have a full parliamentary debate on this? Would it just be hot air? No, because members of Parliament, under parliamentary privilege, can bring any information into a debate without the threat of being sued. It means MPs could, by the end of next week, name names if things really have gone badly wrong, and from that we might get some action. A public inquiry on its own simply isn't enough. We're going to need a lot more. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back on Monday at 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you, and we're going to continue this conversation as the Prime Minister announces that public inquiry into